Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the 5th annual Stern Innovation Conference, sponsored by the New York University Fubon Center for Technology, Business, and Innovation. My name is Melissa Schilling. I'm a professor of management here at Stern. I'm also director of the Innovation Initiative at the Fubon Center. And we want to give our thanks also to the Fubon Corporation, who has made this possible. We have a super exciting lineup today. As you know, our theme is innovation and environmental sustainability, and we have the dream team of speakers who are going to come and give you both some academic perspectives, some practitioner perspectives, and talk to you about some of the stuff that's being developed at companies right now to address environmental sustainability. So I want to go ahead and introduce our first speaker today, who is Tensie Whelan. Tensie Whelan is a clinical professor here at NYU and director of the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. She has 25 years of experience working on local, national, and international sustainability issues. Prior to joining NYU, she was president of the Rainforest Alliance, and she built that organization from a $4.5 million organization to $50 million budget, transforming the engagement of business with sustainability and recruiting more than 5,000 companies in more than 60 countries to work with the Rainforest Alliance. So that's so amazing. She is also a terrific person and a terrific professor. She won the Stern Faculty Excellence Award in 2020. So thank you so much for joining us, Tensie. I'm really excited to hear you today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Melissa. It's a real pleasure to be with you, and you've got a great lineup, and I'm honored to be amongst the team and looking forward to our conversation and discussion.
Thank you. Oh, and I want to remind everybody out there, I will turn off my video here for a while, but please go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we will get to some of your questions towards the tail end of Tensie's talk.
Perfect. Thank you. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, perfect. So as we think about innovation and sustainability-driven innovation in particular, as with all innovation, we can think about it incrementally, right? Making improvements, or transformative, really, blue oceans, right? And as we think about it, we can think different ways or sort of different pathways for sustainability-driven innovation. One is around providing solutions to what are material, environmental, social governance issues for a particular company or for a particular industry. It can also provide management tools needed for the transition to things like low carbon, right? And finally, one can have sustainability-driven innovation that is tackling broad societal challenges and opportunities, for example, tackling climate change. So there's that incremental work with companies and industries, sometimes transformative, for example, moving from meat to plant-based, management tools like information management systems, and then things that are directly focused on impact. All of these types of investments can also drive significant financial value. So that's a theme I'm going to weave throughout this conversation. At the Center for Sustainable Business at Stern, which I run, we've developed a methodology called ROSI, Return on Sustainability Investment, that has identified 9 mediating factors that drive better financial performance when you embed sustainability core to your business strategy and your practice. You can see here the 9 mediating factors, which range from, employee retention and productivity to operational efficiencies to risk management to sales and marketing and innovation. And what we see is that, of course, any kind of good management separate from sustainability can drive those things. But what we're finding with sustainability is that it actually is creating total enterprise value, that many different sustainability practices will drive 3 or 4 of these mediating factors, including innovation, which will be our focus today. So I wanted to just draw a picture quickly with one company, just to give you a sense of what I mean by, in a company context, focusing on the environmental, and here, because of this focus of this conference, we'll be focusing on environment, focusing on key environmental challenges for a pulp and paper company. Domtar is based in North America, a lot of in the Southeast. Anyway, they looked at the fact that pulp and paper generates a lot of waste. In generating that waste, it's going into landfills, which is expensive for Domtar, problematic in terms of the environment, for the community, et cetera. They figured out that their bio-based waste could actually be turned into a fertilizer that would have lower carbon emissions than the nitrogen or phosphorus-based fertilizer that the local farmers use, also be less expensive for them. So now local farmers have a better for the environment fertilizer that's cheaper, and Domtar can actually get some small revenue from that and no longer pays the waste disposal costs. And on top of that, the community no longer has to dispose of the waste. So a win-win solution. They also then looked at the fact they make a lot of diapers. So when you have diapers with the little holes in them, you have to, for the legs, you have to stamp those little holes out, which leaves a lot of waste that you don't do much with. So they came up with a new technology that sonically melds the legs, the holes in the legs, and reduces the waste. They also then looked at the fact that diapers are very light, but take up a lot of space. So when you're transporting them, there's a lot of wasted energy as well as cost. So they figured out a way to reduce the bulk of the diapers by about a third, which reduced carbon emissions and reduced cost. And then finally, to sort of understand how innovation requires a really much more holistic way of thinking when you're looking at environmental sustainability, they looked at water. And in the Southeast, water is not a risky thing. You get lots of it. It's free. And so the mill manager said to the chief sustainability officer, "Why are you bothering me about water?" Well, and as he looked at it, he found that all that quote unquote free water was actually costing $1.5 million per mill per year because of all the energy required to move around the water, heat and cool the water, and the wastewater disposal cost. So now they're focusing on innovation to tackle those challenges. So if we look at where we've been in terms of innovation, obviously innovation covers a wide range of things, but a lot of it has been focused on democratizing access to information, to money, to products, to songs, et cetera, right? And if we look forward now in this moment we're in, we're seeing that this generation of innovation is really shifting to solving for the world's environmental and social challenges. Circularity is a big part of that innovation wave. It's not the only thing, but I wanted to talk about circularity first, and then we'll move to other types of innovation. And the reason why circularity is driving innovation and business opportunity is because currently our economic development model is based on natural resource use. So you can see here, the more economically developed you get, the more resources you use. And it's also dependent on us generating an enormous amount of waste. The more economically developed we are, the more waste we generate. In order to ensure that companies and individuals who are have a lower quality of living than we do be able to enjoy the quality of living that we have, and then also for us to have a more sustainable quality of living, we need to learn how to decouple economic development from both natural resource use and waste generation. And when we look at this study, what shows us that we are actually currently only reusing or recycling 10% of all the natural resources we extract every year, you can see that there's huge opportunity for innovation to figure out what to do with all of that waste to turn it into a more circular approach so that we can actually continue to develop sustainably. So the goals of the circular economy in terms of innovation are to design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and to regenerate natural systems. And you can see here our traditional kind of linear economy. We extract the stuff, we make the stuff, and we dispose of the stuff. And instead, we want to close the loops. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has done a lot of work around the circular economy. You can see here on the right-hand side, you can apply innovation to finite materials. On the left-hand side, you can apply innovation to renewables. And you can see the different models that evolve out of circularity with finite materials, ranging from refurbishing and recycling to reusing to prolonging the life to sharing. And on the left, things like turning food waste into biogas, having regenerative agriculture, et cetera, all with the aim of minimizing the natural resource use and the waste and other byproduct generation. Another way to look at it here, again, you can see across a more traditional value chain that there are opportunities for innovation around circularity at every part of the value chain, both across the different value chain actors and within each bucket, right? So you can reuse at end of life, customer can repurpose, they can restore, they can repair, et cetera. And then you see down at the bottom all the different types of circular economy approaches one can think about as business. And there are a lot of technologies that are helping to drive the uptake of circularity, as well as more environmentally sustainable approaches, from the Internet of Things and blockchain to 3D printing and nanotechnology to bioenergy and aeroponics in terms of farming. So a whole series of different ways and technologies that can help us adapt more circular approaches. So again, bring it to real life. In the EU, cars are now, automotive manufacturers are now responsible for the end-of-life disposal of the vehicles. So what we're seeing is commitment by companies to begin to really reuse old car components and materials and put them back into new cars. Renault is now 36% of all newly produced vehicles in Europe are made with reused components, and they have now designed their cars to be 85% recyclable and 95% recoverable. Again, a lot of this comes down to design and redesigning how we do things to make it possible for them to be separated into their different parts, and then figure out, again, from an innovation perspective, what do you do with all those materials? This has been so profitable for them, they've created their own company that manages it. They've also created a reused parts business, which is very helpful to them financially and also saves a lot of environmental byproducts, as you see here. And then they're partnering with others to innovate around some of the other areas that they really haven't figured out a second purpose for, such as plastics, aluminum, copper, etc. We know that this is financially really helpful to companies where they don't normally think about it as financially helpful. So we did some work with our return on sustainability investment, work with the automotive sector, worked with another automotive manufacturer that was reusing 2.5% of their end-of-life material in Europe and selling 10% of it to recyclers and then paying to have the rest disposed of. They had a total net EBIT savings of $100 million, which they did not know because generally finance does not track avoided cost, which is a really big part of a lot of this innovation, right? So if you think about circularity, you're no longer buying the virgin stuff and you're no longer paying the disposal costs, right? Which is where you get a lot of your savings. Here's a fun innovation example in the still in the car sector and also circular. This is a prototype. This is not on the road, but actually a tire manufacturer is doing some interesting stuff. But I love the design behind this and the innovation thinking. So this tire is printed on a 3D printer. So it's only printed on demand, so you don't have waste. Second, the rubber itself is recycled. That goes into the 3D printer. Third, the rubber is hard, so it lasts much longer. Fourth, the moss embedded in the tire takes in carbon dioxide and emits oxygen, so therefore reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Also, when it's wet, it makes the tire stickier on the road, so it addresses safety. And finally, in the hub, there is an AI technology that will talk to an autonomous vehicle. And this is a tire, right? So what we're seeing is innovation driven by sustainability issues going into this design, which is just fascinating. So as we think about circularity and think about sort of where that happens and how it happens, we've done some work at this Stern Center for Sustainable Business to understand kind of across the value chain, where are all the different practices that you can put in place around circularity. So you can look at product take-back programs, circular packaging solutions, production waste and product longevity, reducing product returns. This is all in the apparel space. And we did some work with Eileen Fisher to understand the benefits of circularity. They developed their own Renew program where you bring back gently used clothing to Eileen Fisher. They'll upcycle it into felt and make it into something else or resell it. They saw really significant profit from the program. Also, people with the coupon they gave them buy more product. But even more importantly, they saw a whole lot of young people coming in where they had struggled earlier to get a younger demographic. And the circular approach really engaged the younger generation to the tune of all of these benefits, around $1.8 million net for a company like Eileen Fisher, quite substantial. So you remember earlier I said we have these rosy mediating factors. If you look at circularity and its role in innovation, it drives operational efficiency, it drives innovation, it drives customer loyalty, sales and marketing, and it can also drive risk management, better risk. Because if you think about it, we're dependent on these very complex supply chains, global supply chains. When you embrace circularity, then you actually, for part of your work, you're able to kind of bring that back in-house, right? Because you're reusing it. So you're less dependent on a risky global supply chain. And I think, well, so just to show you here, we also think through how you would monetize the financial returns of investments in these kinds of things. Because as you're looking at incremental innovation within a company, you've got to justify these types of investments. So here we looked at implementing take-back programs for textile recycling and upcycling. You can see there's operational efficiencies from reduced material costs, there's reduced supply chain disruption, so risk mitigation, and there's revenue from selling materials for textile recycling and upcycled products. And then also, if you look at the lower left here, encourage takebacks for products, there's also new purchase sales, lower customer acquisition costs, and unpaid earned media, all as benefits of engaging in a circularity project for a company like an apparel company. So that was a bit on circularity. I want to then look at how innovation can help tackle new processes and materials and new products and services. And again, as I mentioned before, we're looking at, sort of, are we thinking about innovation in an incremental way or a transformative way? Both are good. And I think I found this sort of schematic from Chris Laszlo, who wrote a book called Embedded Sustainability, a useful, simple way to think about this, right? Where does your company currently sit? Is it in the polluting or inequitable space, or is it in the solving global problem space? So solving global problems, you could be a food company. Polluting or inequitable, you could be an oil and gas or chemical company. You can then think about what kind of innovation might you have. So as a chemical company, you could move to green chemistry, which would be an incremental improvement, or you can move all the way to biochemistry, which would be sort of completely transforming how you do things. You could, if you're a food company, have problematic processed highly salted and sugared product that's not sustainably sourced. You could then improve nutrition, improve sustainability, and move in an incremental way to innovation. Or you could, completely turn upside down the category, like we saw with plant-based foods. So, as I walk through some examples with you here, I want to show you, first of all, some category disruptors. So as we think about sustainability-driven innovation, we can think about it, as I mentioned earlier, on a company basis, on a category or industry basis, and then on a kind of challenge or opportunity basis. So here we're going to look at laundry detergent and food and apparel as areas where in the category, there's a lot of innovation happening. And then we're going to look at some industry-wide innovations on specific topics like water or data management. So these are, agnostic as to industry. So if we think about laundry detergent, right? So the first innovation prior to this one was actually when we moved from the very large plastic bottles to high efficiency bottles. And actually, that was a tough transition because people thought they were getting cheated, right? They were used to paying X for a large bottle. Now all of a sudden, they're paying the same amount for a much smaller bottle. And in fact, Walmart put their finger on the scales and actually gave better shelf coverage, et cetera, to those companies that did this. And over time, people got used to it. That meant that there's, if you look at a gallon plastic jug, making the plastic jug, you use 4 to 5 gallons of water, right? So in the plastic gallon itself, you've got container yourself, you've got a lot of embedded water, you have a lot of embedded carbon. It's made out of petroleum. And then in the detergent, of course, you have a lot of water, et cetera. So, and then when you transport it, when it's big and heavy, you've got a lot of carbon emissions. So again, the first innovation was making it smaller, which was also more convenient for the customer. When you look at the carbon footprint of laundry detergent, the biggest part of the carbon footprint comes from us using hot or warm water to do our laundry. So the next innovation here has been around cold water detergents to enable you as a customer to both save money. Again, these things come back to what's in it for the customer as well as what's in it for the environment in this case, and also reduces carbon footprint substantially. But there's other innovations too, because you're still in that past one, got the big plastic bottle and the embedded water and carbon and transport. So this is an innovation called Eco Egg. It's a bio-based plastic egg with minerals in it that will last for 700 plus laundries. I've used it. It works very well. And it saves you an enormous amount of money and also convenience. Think about how many large plastic bottles you would have had to buy, lug, and carry home. And you've got this option instead. Another way to go in this category is laundry soap strips, right? So again, you can get a full year in a little cardboard box. You don't have the plastic, the embedded water, the carbon transport costs, etc. And again, I've used these and they work very well. So people thinking about like the challenges related to laundry detergent are able to innovate in the space. Food's another big challenge in a whole variety of ways. Food waste is a big issue, and we waste about 40% of our food, which leads to methane emissions, lost money, lost opportunity for people to get the food, etc. So Winnow has made a product for restaurants and food service where you can track very easily what your food purchases are, what your waste is, and identify ways to optimize your food use and far reduce your food waste. There are also opportunities for retail customers in terms of non-toxic products that will extend the life of the fruit and produce or enable you to compost it. Refrigeration of transport of fruit and produce is really a big greenhouse gas emitter and a cost. This particular product innovation was around a plant-based product, a preservative that will protect your produce as it travels without refrigeration. And we also have a lot of innovation around urban farming, looking at how do we get away from massive use of chemicals, deforestation, water, soil erosion, chemical use, etc., and also bring food closer to urban areas. And we also have innovation things around, the challenges related to animal welfare and carbon emissions and other impacts with companies like this one working on lab-grown chicken. This is now sold in Singapore. Moving on to the apparel sector, here we've got a lot of focus on innovation around the materials. So as you may know, the apparel sector is one of the most polluting in the world in a whole variety of ways, enormous use of water, chemical problems, petrochemicals. There's also a lot of energy use. There's enormous amount of waste everywhere throughout the apparel chain, but particularly with fast fashion, with disposing of your clothes after wearing them a time or two. So starting with the materials, there's a lot of innovation around how do we move away from these chemically produced problematic materials. So on the left, the white, orange, and blue dresses that you see are made out of discarded milk. Now, the question is, where do you get enough discarded milk and how do you collect it to make enough dresses? But the idea here is to really figure out what we can learn from these bio-based materials and hopefully be able to scale. Other things people are looking at, any kind of waste that leaves a fiber like pineapple, coffee grounds, etc. Also things that you can farm like nettles. And then we're seeing a lot of innovation around forest products. Lyocell and Tencel, for example, are made out of forests, out of cellulose from forests, and forests can be managed sustainably. So if you can do that in a way that manages for those forests sustainably, there's interesting opportunities there as well. We're also seeing innovation on the leather side. On the right, you'll see leather produced by Modern Meadow, company based out of New Jersey, lab-grown leather to be used everywhere from cars to apparel, car upholstery to apparel. And on the left, you also see another innovation, which is fungi that's raised to eat sawdust. And that fungi sawdust makes this kind of leather, which has a nice grain to it, really interesting looking. We're also seeing innovation around the fast fashion quandary, right? So let's say you want to keep changing up your fashion, but you don't want to keep, like all the natural resource use and waste associated with that. So on the right-hand side, you see a dress that was printed on a 3D printer out of bio-based material. Now, it took 36 hours to print it, but I would imagine that that's a technological challenge that can be addressed and improved upon so that people can print their clothes, and then you can take that bio-based material back and have it turned back into the product that you print out another dress or shirt or whatever. On the left-hand side, similar idea, but spray on. So you can spray on a t-shirt, again, out of a bio-based material. When you're done with the t-shirt, then the bio-based material gets reused. And then my final example, which is mainstreamed, is this Nike Flyknit technology. So Nike was looking at the challenge associated with your traditional or conventional form of making sneakers, where you have little bits and pieces that make the upper that you then sew together. When you stamp out those bits and pieces, you have a lot of waste. And they also wanted to create a higher performing shoe, right? So again, innovation around sustainability needs to tackle the key attributes of the product as well as be, a sustainability oriented innovation. So here they had those twin goals. And what they did, they came up with this idea of Flyknit, which is a recycled strand of plastic, basically, that is woven into the upper. It is a higher performing shoe in that it's 19% lighter. It's reduced waste by 80%. It's $1 billion plus business for them. And it's been a category disruptor. When you look around at other sneaker companies, many of them adopted this technology. Looks slightly different, but it's pretty much the same idea. All right, so now I'm going to move on to some kind of issues that people are working on that are more focused on the kind of material issues for the world, right? So water. We are struggling with, across the world, in this country and everywhere else, we're extracting more groundwater than is generated back into the ground. We have polluted a number, our waterways. So we have a real challenge around water. And for business, water is enormous impact, right? Because you're using it for manufacturing processes, you're using it for production, you're using it for agriculture. I mean, water is sort of what makes the world go round from a business perspective for many, many products. And in the manufacturing phase, right, you not only use a lot of water for your manufacturing, but you have waste that comes with that water, as I mentioned in the pulp and paper plant example. So BASF, a chemicals company that's been doing a lot of innovation around green chemistry, to solve for the solutions of their customers, has worked on this flocculant that provides a more efficient method of separation of liquids from solids in wastewater treatment. In doing this, you can recycle more water, you have a drier, lighter solid, which is easier to transform into fertilizer or pellets, or if you're disposing of it, it's lighter, so it requires less carbon to transport it. And you see below, it saves the clients money because they're using so much less water in the manufacturing process, and ultimately reduces the pressure on local water supplies. We also see companies, I mentioned earlier, kind of management systems, right? So you need technologies that will actually tackle the problem, but often you need to understand kind of the problem itself, be able to collect your data, manage your data, understand where your risks are. And this company, a new startup called WaterPlan, has used an AI platform to help companies understand where they have water risk, how to drive water security and business resilience in their operations. Another water innovation, this is a company that's created these screens that collect fog and transform that fog into usable water, right? So again, trying to figure out some of the innovations around water scarcity that we're all dealing with. Another big challenge for the world is our plastic packaging. We've come up with solutions, niche solutions, but we haven't come up with sort of mainstream solutions that enable us to move away from petroleum-based plastic, which, as you all know, not only is a massive, massive problem for garbage all over the world, waste all over the world, but also is ending up in our water, in our bodies, to the tune of, a plastic credit card of plastic. So we want to move away from that. And there's a lot of innovation happening in the space. This company, New Light, is creating a bio-based plastic from air and methane-based greenhouse gas, which again, you can extract in a circular way from, for example, landfills, dissolved in salt water, and then the product that they're making itself will be recyclable for biological digestion. This plan is operative, but again, like many of these innovations, they're in the early stages. So that to me, this one is an example of a transformative technology if it moves forward. This is an example of more of an incremental approach, but still important. So TerraCycle has worked with a number of consumer packaged goods companies on a project called Loop, where they worked to solve for the challenge of these single-use plastic packaging products, and instead developed a permanent, so to say, packaging that is delivered to the customer, and then when the customer is done with it, they leave the packaging for the company to pick up, sort of like the old milkman approach. This has struggled. I think we've got a challenge related to convenience for many customers. But again, it's an example of another innovation. And there's a lot of other sort of packaging-oriented innovations that are incremental like this, like, for example, cleaning products where again, so you don't have the whole bottle embedded with the water transporting, you get a little pellet of the soap, you put it into the water in the product, and then when you're done, you do the same thing again. So you just keep refilling the bottle. So a lot of innovation along those lines. We're also seeing a lot of innovation around data management. I mentioned in the water context before, but what we're seeing both from a compliance and reporting perspective, so as the EU, the US, Southeast Asia, China, India, all these, Brazil are beginning to require environment, social, and governance metric disclosure. You're going to see more and more companies like SAP, Workiva, and others develop data platforms that will help companies both manage their reporting, but also manage their strategies and practices and programs related to sustainability. And I know this is environmentally driven innovation, but I wanted to give one social example from one of our wonderful Stern alums, Samir Gol. Again, to say like innovation, environmental, but also social. So the innovation he came up with here, this company called Isuzu, he came from a family of immigrants. They had real challenges accessing credit because they couldn't build a credit history. So he developed this company that's now, valued as $1 billion plus unicorn with Goldman Sachs and others investing in it. That is a one-stop shop for renters who provide their rental payment information through their landlords, right? So they're able to establish a credit history that then the 3 credit bureaus have agreed to incorporate into their credit rating. So as people pay their rent on time, their landlords benefit because their landlords get the money on time. The credit agencies benefit because they now have insight into credit of these folks. And then obviously the renters are able to build credit over time and hopefully be able to build wealth. So fascinating kind of social innovation. So I'm going to end here with a little exercise for us to do in our last 2 minutes here. And I'm going to ask you to put into the chat So just again, sort of help us think out of the box and understand the kind of innovation and sustainability benefits here. So you're the CEO of a home furnishing company. Sofa. You today people, buy their sofas, they tend to throw them out after a couple of years, a lot of waste associated with that. How might you rethink the circularity of your sofa? What could you produce for customers that would enable you to reduce waste, but also enable you to have an ongoing engagement with your customers, right? So rather than just the one touch of selling on the sofa, you actually build out an ongoing relationship and serve their needs as they grow and shift in terms of what they need their sofa for, or have spit up on the sofa or whatever, right? So I'm going to ask you to just throw your ideas. I'm going to stop sharing into the chat, and I'm just going to read them out loud as I see them. So just throw in whatever you, if I can see them here. Maybe I can't.
Well, while they're doing that, can I take the moderator's prerogative and ask you a question? By the way, everybody, throw your questions down in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. We would love to hear your questions. But I have been dying to ask you this question, and it's kind of a big one. I hope it's an okay question to ask, but there are a lot of things that we hear about and they sound awesome, but we forget and we don't incorporate them in our day-to-day activities. And we hear about things that firms could do, but maybe they don't do, or we don't hear about them. And it's always made me wonder, what is that balance between the need for regulation, for like rules and penalties and incentives that are going to require us to adopt some of these things, versus, a lot of your examples seem to be driven mostly by market incentives, like this is a better product, we're going to like it more, we're going to pay more for it, maybe we'll have higher stock returns. So what is you've had a long time to think about this. What are your personal thoughts about that?
Well, I think we need a combination of approaches, right? We absolutely need government incentives. So the Inflation Reduction Act, with its focus on supporting investment in the low carbon transition, has been a game changer in terms of more and more companies coming here to manufacture and support that transition. And in fact, the infrastructure bill, all of the work that the Biden administration has been doing actually to invest in manufacturing, a lot of it is around innovation and sustainability, right? And so I think that's huge. I also do think that the sort of compliance and reporting piece is important. It can drive innovation as well. We've seen, for example, that end-of-life recycling requirements in the EU. Now, there wouldn't have been that innovation around reuse of auto component parts without that regulation from the EU, right? Because we don't have it here, and we don't have that regulation here, and we don't have that kind of innovation here. And in fact, that innovation in the EU led to a whole bunch of small businesses too, so it created a lot of jobs, right? So I think that the government can play a really important role, and it needs to be a balance between compliance-oriented regulation and incentives that can drive support for particular technologies. But again, the government, while sometimes can choose, well, you really need the private sector to innovate based on where the real needs are. And also, for me, a fascinating area of innovation too is how many companies are building their own accelerators to focus on sustainability, as well as partnering with investment firms like closed loop partners or energy impact partners, where they are getting money from companies off of their balance sheets to invest in innovative technologies that then those companies will buy if they work out, right? So a lot of interesting things happening in the private market space too.
So, related to that, I'm just going to give an example from my own life. I found that as soon as they incorporated in my car, there's now a little thing that tells me what miles per gallon I'm getting at any moment, right? And it was such immediate direct feedback that I noticed I started changing the way I drive. I don't accelerate as much and I coast more and all kinds of things. I try to make sure I keep my car plugged in so I can use electricity for as much, I have a hybrid, much of my drive as possible. But when you were talking about the carbon footprint of the laundry detergent and things like that, it made me think, why don't we have a really nice visible marker on the packaging that tells us what the carbon footprint of all these products are? Like, is there a standards organization working on something like that? Or is it there already and it's not, and I'm not noticing it? Because that kind of immediate feedback on the store shelf, I think, is super important.
Yes, there are 3 or 4 reputable carbon labels, carbon neutral, net carbon, a variety of other things that tell you. The challenge is, as you're looking at the carbon footprint of a product, what are you looking at in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3? And how do you benchmark it against another company, which may or may not be disclosing, or if they're disclosing, they may not be disclosing all of their emissions. So it's a challenging space. But we do a lot of, as you know, consumer research where we're looking at actual purchasing of sustainable products. And we saw the purchasing of carbon labeled products grow exponentially. It was next to nothing in 2019. It went up to 1 billion or so in 2020, and then it went up to 3 billion plus in 2021, I think. So there absolutely is demand and interest for that.
Cool. That's awesome. When I was young, I remember when they came out with dolphin safe tuna. And then from that point on, we would never buy tuna that wasn't dolphin safe tuna because the marker on the can was so visible. I have a great question from the audience here. Aisha Pia Asrapuntri, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, wants to ask, how can the university, or universities probably generally, let's expand that, strengthen the environmental norms of the faculty members to help the university achieve better environmental performance?
We have a terrific Office of Sustainability at Stern that is working very hard. They have created commitments related to carbon, to water, to our food services, et cetera. They're working with faculty. They work with student groups to move forward agenda on these topics. We actually have a code generation plant here, which helps keep on the Stern campus, that keeps our emissions low. Not to say there isn't more to be done. And the previous president had sustainability as a core part of their commitment. And the new president, Linda Mills, who I've spoken with about it, has also made it clear that she's very committed to continuing to grow and improve our footprint from an environmental perspective, both in terms of our own operations, but also in terms of our education.
Okay, so that actually relates pretty nicely to, there's another question here that Lucia Montalvo asks that says, how do you think about the integral environmental footprint of some of these innovations? They might actually be highly energy or water intensive to produce, for instance. And then she or he brings up some examples. And, for example, in electric vehicles, there's been a lot of pushback lately about maybe the batteries are actually worse for the environment, making the batteries, right? Maybe that's worse for the environment. So how do we think about that sort of long life cycle effect? Well, it goes back to the question, the thing you answered to my question initially, like, what are you measuring?
Right. So we have a solution for that, which is life cycle analysis or assessment. And you can do LCAs from, as they call it, cradle to cradle. So all the way from not only so cradle to grave would be like, from all the way from the extraction to the manufacturing and to the disposal, but you could then also even do a fuller cradle to cradle where you analyze the environmental impact of putting it back into the system, right? Let's say you're reusing. So there are absolutely the technologies to assess these things. And we need to, of course, look at all of that. I would say, just going to your example, there is absolutely some challenges around electric vehicles. The first really is that mostly they're being charged with non-renewable energy, right? So if the grid isn't renewable, then they're not using renewable energy. Nevertheless, you still use less than oil and gas. That's one point. The other point you raised were around the batteries themselves. So you have lithium and cobalt. Very controversial, very challenging, some very bad behavior, not necessarily by the car companies themselves, but by some of the buyers of those minerals. So one, you can incrementally improve that through improving the engagements with the communities, having more responsible and sustainable approaches to the extraction of those products. But there's a lot of innovation happening. There's folks working on batteries that can be, rather than lithium, use sodium. So, again, to me, you go to the categories. So now we're looking at electric car category. What are the big challenges? Well, one is around the battery. So let's go see the innovation around that, right? And solve for that challenge.
Yeah, I'm advising a company called Zeta Energy that makes a lithium sulfur battery. It still uses lithium, but it doesn't use cobalt or manganese or nickel, which is a pretty big step in the right direction, I think. We're running out of time, but Hope Aqua asks if there's a set of business key performance indicators already evolving for measuring sustainability. And I know kind of what you're going to say there, but what I want to modify her question a little bit and ask you, is there a place where we can find out what you think the best metrics or standards are that we could keep an eye on so that, you know, in our investing, in our purchasing behavior, what is there a place we can find these?
There's not one place, and I have a very strong opinion about this. So I'm going to take my last minute. So there are reporting standards, which include voluntary, which include the ISSB, International Sustainable Standards Board, which has now subsumed the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board. These are reporting standards. They are process output based metrics. So they don't drive performance improvements, right? They look at things like policies. Having a policy on chemical management may not drive better performance. A bio-based dye might, right? But they don't look at that, right? So very important to understand that those are just reporting metrics and use them that way. Don't manage to them. There are impact frontiers, and the GIN, the Global Impact Investors Network, have put out information on how to design impact-oriented KPIs. We ourselves at Stern are working on a tool for our return on sustainability investment methodology, which will have in there suggested a database against material ESG issues of suggested sustainability KPIs and return on sustainability investment KPIs, because we're not happy with like the focus on the reporting metrics as performance drivers. It's fine for reporting, but not for innovation.
Cool. Fantastic answer. I feel like we could talk for another couple of hours, but we are out of time. Tensie, thank you so much for an awesome conversation. And I'm personally looking forward to following up with you. I invite our guests to reach out also if you want me to help put you in touch with Tensie to follow up with some of these interesting ideas. And by the way, you got a lot of suggestions on the couch in the Q&A field. So hopefully Liz will capture that and then maybe we'll post them somewhere, which will be fun.
Wonderful.
Thank you.